Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Today we're discussing the mystery and tragedy of Craftworld Zaisuthra. Spoiler warning to begin, as the events we're discussing today are from the novel Ghost Warrior by author Gav Thorpe. As always, I really recommend you read the stories for yourself first, as that's the best way to enjoy the lore for yourself, without spoilers. And with that said, let's just jump straight in. With the fall of their ancient empire, the race of the Eldari was forever shattered, turned onto a slow downward spiral of extinction throughout the remaining centuries. The Drukhari would continue their heinous ways behind the sheltered walls of the Webway. The Exodites would abandon their former kin to seek new, simpler lives on far-flung worlds. And the Asayani, as they came to be, would attempt to flee the destruction on fleets of salvation. How many of these fleets attempted to flee the Empire in its final days, we don't truly know. Perhaps even the Eldari themselves do not. What we do know is many Craftworlds did indeed manage to escape the birth of Slaanesh. The biggest, most populous, or simply the most famous are well-known names to our ears. Ulthwé, Biltan, Alatok, Eandon, and Samehan. These names have had countless appearances within the sagas and history of the galaxy. At times enemies to the people of mankind, at others their ally. But aside these legendary names, the lives of the smaller Craftworlds has been no easier. Suffering if not equally as troublesome times, then most definitely harder. With many suffering far worse fates than their larger kin, and of these none more so than the Craftworld known as Zaisuthra. Now, we learnt of Zaisuthra from the novel Ghost Warrior, and I haven't read too many Eldari reads over the years, but Ghost Warrior has been by far my favourite one to date. The story follows the quest of Yvraine and the Ynnari in her attempts to attain the final Crone Sword, and more importantly, it covers the events of the Ynnari and Eandon Craftworld reuniting with the long-fought lost Craftworld of Zaisuthra, which has reappeared under mysterious circumstances. Now, Zaisuthra hadn't been seen or heard of since the fall of the Eldar Empire, and it was a fairly legendary Craftworld, for it was believed to hold the Webway portal to the tomb of Eldanesh, or at least so the legend went. And in having ties to the Craftworld of Eandon, via the old Eldari family houses, the Andeni assembled a force to investigate its return with the Ynnari. Where Zaisuthra has been, how it had survived, was all a complete mystery. However, with its reappearance, passages of the Webway that had led to it, long dead and lifeless, had suddenly sprung back into life, though the portals themselves had remained sealed. And these are the kind of little nuggets of lore information that I just absolutely love. So much about the Webway is still just a complete mystery, just how it all truly works. And it goes to show how easily things within this realm can change, how these long-fought lost passages or portals can just re-emerge in the blink of an eye, reborn as if they'd never been lost. It makes you wonder about a certain lost Primarch within the maze of the Webway, how easily things could change there. However, I digress. Throughout the story, the mystery of Zaisuthra only deepens. Thanks to those bonds of ancient Eldari houses, the meeting and reunion is allowed, and is thankfully a peaceful one, if undoubtedly cautious and guarded by both sides. But it's here within this reunion we get some more particularly interesting snippets of information from Yvraine's point of view. Several thousand turned out to commemorate the Ynnari, but they lined avenues and galleries that would have held 10 times that number. Though never one of the largest craft worlds, upon the eve of its departure, Zaisuthra would have housed 1 million souls and more. Over time, that number had dwindled significantly, if the size of the greeting crowds was any indication. Now, I think this is perhaps one of the most often overlooked aspects regarding the craft worlds, just how immense they actually are. So much of the Eldari race is overlaid and focused onto their slowly dying situation, that we forget just how powerful these craft worlds can be, how powerful they actually are. Zaisuthra, here described as never one of the largest craft worlds, was still more than capable, and indeed did house over 1 million Eldari. That is an absolutely immense vessel, and it goes some way to helping understand just how tragic the devastation of the larger craft worlds, Biltan and Eandon, truly was. 2 of the greatest congregations of Eldari left, and both were virtually destroyed. Countless of precious Eldari lives lost. And that's a loss that can never truly be recovered from. Now, in particular for Zaisuthra, as stated, their loss appeared to be noticeable as well. And there were a few more evident differences. Firstly, even amongst this scattered thousand, there were virtually no children, all the crowd being made up of older Eldari. Secondly, we learn Zaisuthra had apparently escaped the birth of Slaanesh by fleeing out into the darkness of the void, which is why it had never been seen again until now, understandably believed lost. However, perhaps most markedly of all, is the people of the craft world did not wear spirit stones, and instead escaped Slaanesh's grip through some other means, and not the method of the Drukhari either. The Infinity Circuit of the craft world too was different, referred to by its people as the group mind, and it was sealed off from the outsiders, leaving the Ynnari and Eandeni able to sense it, but unable to communicate with it, unable to see within, as they would be able to on any other craft world. Now, to a non-Eldari, you may begin to think this all highly suspicious, and indeed maybe it is. But we really need to take into account just how desperate the Eldari people are. As we've said, the Eldari Empire was lost, and this wasn't just some conglomeration of territory lost. It was virtually their entire civilization, their entire people. As huge and gargantuan as the craft worlds were that fled, they were still barely a handful of what was left behind. For every farm or village that the Exodites may have founded, an entire world of culture was lost. Billions upon billions of Eldari lives were gone within that one moment. The survivors' lives since has been one of a desperate struggle for survival, as we know, going from one tragedy to another, on the run from a hungering god, as the remaining population dwindled ever further. As such, when a long-believed lost craft world returns, yes, there is of course caution, suspicion, but the Eldari can't help but feel hope. And maybe that overrides that caution and suspicion more than it should, because quite simply it's all the Eldari have. So yes, the Ynnari and Eandeni who visited Zaisuthra were of course suspicious. They were wary, but they were also perhaps blinded by their hope. All of those differences upon Zaisuthra could of course be explained. Whereas the other craft worlds had grown, evolved together, sharing the new technologies and ways of life, Zaisuthra had no one, It didn't have those shared experiences. It didn't have other craft worlds to work with. Zaisuthra had to learn and adapt to surviving on its own. And so that's exactly what it did. But, and as always there is a but, if there is any lesson to be learned from this grimdark universe we all know and love, it's that you're usually right to be suspicious. For Zaisuthra's differences were indeed different for a reason, because it had not survived on its own. They had faced, they had gotten through the hardships, the struggles, the deaths, just as all their fellow craft worlds had, except their salvation had come in the form of a gene stealer cult. At some point within its journey out amongst the void, the craft world had become infected, infiltrated by gene stealers. And throughout the years the cult had taken over and melded with the entire craft world, on every level. In some form of psychic, symbiotic nature, the very craft world itself had become an odd fusion of Eldarian Tyranid structure. The Wraithbone a more organic, flesh-like material. Their psychic network of the group mind was instead a melded blend of occult brood mind. And even the avatar of Cain itself, the beating heart of every craft world, had seemingly somehow become the Patriarch, referred to as the Patriarch of Cain. This, as all other aspects of Zaisuthra, had become a blend of Genestealer and Eldari, an evolution of Avatar and Patriarch. Now, how it happened is unknown. For me, I think most likely the young king who traditionally becomes absorbed or possessed by the Avatar was most likely already infected by the cult. Or perhaps the first Genestealer itself, traditionally the one that would evolve to be the Patriarch, somehow fused with the Avatar. Or perhaps it was simply a form of the cult's psychic mind control. It's all a bit of a tantalizing mystery. However, we do get a brief explanation of sorts from the Zaisuthrans. For generations, the Patriarch of Cain has watched over the people of Zaisuthra. When we fought the gods dead, when we fled into the bitter darkness between the most distant stars, we thought we were alone. Like you, like the other misguided, we feared the gods had finally died or left us. Yet there was one that had not. She who first you have named her. Her touch followed us still. Her curse was in our bones and in our minds. Assailed by our own weaknesses and assaulted by the demons of the dark powers, there was no hope of salvation. Then we came upon the messengers of Cain, who sought us out from the outer realms. We and they became one, and with their strength, with the power of the Patriarch and the group mind, we stalled decay and found fresh purpose. So it appears the people of Zaisuthra fell as any other, an undetected infiltration, and then the overwhelming brood mind of the cult. A sad fate of being preyed upon by the demons, pursued by Slaanesh even out amongst the darkness, only to go through all of that suffering to fall to the Tyranids. As with the worlds of man, who view the Patriarch as a twisted version of the Emperor, so too do we see the same here. The Eldari are twisted to see one of their gods within the Patriarch, Cain. The cult of the Messengers of Cain was born. Within the deepest chambers of the craft world, the realities and truth of Zaisuthra was laid bare. The presence of the cult in all its forms, from the hibernating pure strain genestealers to all the evolutions in between. Here they found the true population of Zaisuthra. twisted and mutated by the Gene Stealer seed. Now, I find the fate of Zaisuthra really intriguing, because so often we see a Gene Stealer cult upon the worlds of the Imperium, or if it is with the Eldari, it's normally an invading hive fleet. However, here we've seen the realities of what can happen if a Gene Stealer cult were to arise upon a Craftworld, in what became a truly unique situation. Considering Zaisuthra was still alive and had not been consumed by a hive fleet, you'd expect this to mean the population simply wasn't worth the Tyranids' attention. The psychic signal was simply not enough biomass to draw them in, which would explain why Zaisuthra returned to the galaxy, to lure in new Eldari to contaminate, to spread the cult further. It's a cruel twist of fate, I guess, with the Eldari and the Tyranids, how this lost Craftworld has come to see them as their saviour. And of course the fate of Eandon, which was savaged by Hive Fleet Kraken. One race on the downward slope nearing its end, the other only just emerging into the galaxy, with possibly the barest trace of their true numbers yet seen. Again, these are the things I love to see, two unlikely factions coming up against the other. How interesting it would be to see a Gene Stealer cult upon a Tau world, how it may twist the greater good. Or if indeed it could happen upon an Orc world, or even one of Chaos. Maybe a renegade chapter, its servants and serfs giving rise to the cult within its midst. A heretic version of what happened to the scythes of the Emperor. The possibilities are endless. Definitely something I'd be interested in seeing again. So the mystery of Zaisuthra was unfortunately another tragic tale for the Eldari. The outcome would be a purging of the Craftworld by the Inari, and yet another Craftworld consigned to history. A total of 1 million souls now lost. However, it does give rise to one important question, that with all the Craftworlds out there across the galaxy still, just how many of them may be harbouring darker secrets beneath their surface? As always everyone, what do you think? Are you surprised to find out the Gene Stealers could spawn a cult within a Craftworld? Or are you surprised it's not something we've seen before? That actually the Craftworlds would make the perfect target for the silent drifting forms of the Gene Stealers. The perfect situation to form a cult before spreading to other areas. And with yet another fabled Craftworld lost, do you feel the Eldari could ever turn this decline around? Is their only hope truly the Inari and the rising god of the dead? Or maybe, just maybe, is there some other form of hope still out there? As always, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow, and if you enjoyed this particular vid then why not drop a like on it too. With that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.